The iconic orca from Jaws wasn't just destroyed by a shark on screen, its real-life fate was far stranger. From sinking 24 times on purpose to being sold for $1 and eventually chainsawed into 1,000 pieces, this legendary fishing boat had one of Hollywood's most bizarre journeys. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Jaws Orca fishing boat. Fact 1. The Orca was originally named Warlock. When moviegoers first saw the Orca cutting through the waters off Amity Island in 1975, they were looking at a vessel with a secret past. The famous fishing boat wasn't built for Hollywood at all, but started its life as a genuine working vessel named the Warlock. This 42-foot lobster boat originally came from Nova Scotia and had spent years hauling traps in the cold Atlantic waters before anyone at Universal Pictures ever heard of it. The production team found the Warlock in Marblehead, Massachusetts, where it was still actively working as a commercial fishing vessel. They purchased it specifically because they needed an authentic-looking shark hunting boat that could handle the rough conditions they'd face during filming on the open ocean near Martha's Vineyard. The transformation from Warlock to Orca involved more than just slapping a new name on the side. The art department completely redesigned the boat's appearance to match the character of Quint, the grizzled shark hunter played by Robert Shaw. They added the iconic flying bridge where Quint would stand while hunting, installed the barrels that would become such an important part of the film's climax, and covered the deck with the weathered equipment and debris that made it look like a boat that had seen decades of hard use. The goal was to create a vessel that felt lived in and real, not like a Hollywood prop. In the end, the Warlock's working-class background helped sell the authenticity of Quint's world, even though audiences had no idea they were looking at a boat that had genuinely spent years at sea before its Hollywood debut. Fact 2. The stunt boat intentionally sank 24 times. In most maritime situations, a boat sinking even once would be considered a catastrophic failure, but the production of Jaws needed a vessel that could go down on command and do it repeatedly. That's why the special effects team built Orca 2, a fiberglass replica specifically engineered to sink and resurface like a mechanical dolphin. The stunt boat was fitted with an ingenious system of pneumatic barrels and tubes that could be filled with water to make it go down or filled with air to bring it back up. This allowed the crew to control exactly when and how the boat would sink during filming. Over the course of production, they successfully sank Orca 2 24 separate times, each one carefully choreographed to capture different angles and moments of the boat's destruction. The process required precise timing and coordination between the effects team operating the pneumatic systems and the camera operators trying to capture the perfect shot. Each sinking had to look convincingly like a boat going down for the last time, even though everyone knew it would be popping back up moments later for another take. The crew became so skilled at sinking and raising the Orca that it became almost routine, though the tension never completely disappeared because equipment failures could turn a controlled sink into an actual disaster. The 24 successful sinkings represented not just technical achievement, but also the patience and persistence of a production that refused to settle for anything less than the perfect shot, no matter how many times they had to send their boat to the bottom of the Atlantic. Fact 3. $24,000. Cameras went down with the boat. During one particularly ambitious shot, the carefully controlled sinking of Orca 2 turned into an expensive nightmare that had the production team scrambling to save more than just the boat. The stunt vessel was supposed to sink in a controlled manner while cameras captured every moment of its descent, but something went terribly wrong with the pneumatic system. Instead of gradually settling into the water as planned, the Orca 2 went down hard and fast, and it took 2 rented Panavision cameras worth $24,000 per week straight down with it. For a few terrifying moments, the crew faced not just the loss of critical footage, but also a financial disaster that would set the already over-budget production back even further. A panicked crew member dove into the water and managed to retrieve the cameras and the precious film canisters, but everyone knew the clock was ticking. Salt water and film are mortal enemies, and every second that passed meant the footage was deteriorating. In a desperate bid to save the day, someone made a snap decision to stuff the film in a bucket of fresh water, hoping that would slow the chemical reactions, destroying the images. Then they rushed the film to the airport and put a crew member on the first flight to New York with instructions to get to Kodak's labs as fast as humanly possible. The Kodak technicians worked their magic, and miraculously, the footage was saved. The production had dodged a bullet, but it was one more reminder that filming on the water meant everything that could go wrong probably would. Fact 4. The real Orca was too top-heavy to float. Transforming the original Warlock into the movie version of the Orca created an unexpected problem that nearly sank the production before filming even began. All the modifications needed for shooting, including the elevated flying bridge, camera platforms, lighting rigs, and special effects equipment, made the boat dangerously top-heavy. The vessel that had safely hauled lobster traps for years was now so unstable that it could barely stay upright in calm water, let alone handle the rough Atlantic conditions where they'd be filming. The boat desperately needed ballast, the heavy weight placed low in a vessel's hull to keep it stable. But finding several tons of lead on short notice in Martha's Vineyard proved nearly impossible. Then someone on the crew made contact with a local dentist who happened to have exactly what they needed. The dentist had been stockpiling lead sheets intended to shield his X-ray room from radiation, a common practice in medical offices at the time. He agreed to rent his lead supply to the production, but being a savvy businessman who recognized a desperate customer when he saw one, he charged what crew members later described as an exorbitant fee. The production had no choice but to pay whatever he asked because without that ballast, the Orca would roll over and sink the moment they tried to film anything more dynamic than a static shot. They loaded the dentist's lead sheets into the lowest part of the hull, finally bringing the boat into something resembling a safe condition, though it remained notoriously difficult to handle throughout the entire shoot. Fact 5. The stunt boat was sold for $1. After months of being deliberately sunk and raised, battered by waves, and generally abused in the name of cinema, Orca 2 had served its purpose, and Universal Studios needed to figure out what to do with a beat-up fiberglass replica of a fishing boat. The solution came from Lynn Murphy, a local marine mechanic who had worked on the production and developed a fondness for the famous vessel. Murphy approached Universal with an unusual proposition. He offered to take the Orca 2 off their hands, and the studio agreed to sell it to him for exactly $1. For Murphy, it seemed like a fantastic deal. He had plans to repurpose the fiberglass hull to build a shed on his property in Menemsha on Martha's Vineyard, a practical use for what was essentially Hollywood garbage to the studio. The single-dollar transaction made sense for both parties. Universal saved the cost of disposing of a large vessel, and Murphy got free building materials plus a piece of movie history. But Murphy's plans hit an immediate snag when he approached local authorities about his shed project. The building department took one look at his proposal to use a former movie prop as construction material and denied his permit. They weren't interested in having a shed made from the Orca, even if it was structurally sound fiberglass. So Murphy was left with a famous boat hull sitting on his property with no clear purpose. What seemed like a bargain at $1 quickly became more complicated, and the Orca 2 settled in for what would become a 30-year stay on Murphy's Beach, where it would face threats far more persistent than any mechanical shark. Fact 6. Universal bought back the original at 10x the price. Universal Studios made a decision that seemed perfectly reasonable at the time, but would soon come back to haunt them. After filming wrapped, they sold the original working Orca, the converted Warlock that had served as the primary filming vessel, to a fisherman in Los Angeles for $13,000. The studio figured they'd gotten their use out of the boat and had no reason to keep a weathered fishing vessel sitting around taking up space. The LA fishermen presumably planned to use it for its original purpose, hauling in catches off the California coast. But then Jaws opened in theaters in the summer of 1975 and became not just a hit, but a cultural phenomenon that changed Hollywood forever. Suddenly, the Orca wasn't just a used fishing boat anymore. It was a piece of cinematic history, instantly recognizable to millions of moviegoers who had watched it battle the great white shark. Universal quickly realized their mistake and scrambled to track down the boat they'd so casually sold off just months earlier. They found the LA fisherman and made him an offer, but this time the price had changed dramatically. The fisherman, who now understood exactly what he owned, wasn't about to let it go for $13,000. Universal ended up paying 10 times what they had originally sold it for, shelling out $130,000 to buy back their own prop. The studio had effectively paid $117,000 to rent a boat they already owned, an expensive lesson in the value of holding on to movie memorabilia when you have a potential blockbuster on your hands. Fact 7. Spielberg secretly visited the Orca at night. Steven Spielberg's experience making Jaws was notoriously difficult, with the young director later calling it the most challenging shoot of his career. The mechanical sharks constantly broke down, the ocean weather refused to cooperate, and the production went wildly over schedule and budget. But despite the trauma of making the film, Spielberg developed a strange attachment to the Orca. After filming wrapped and Universal brought the boat back to their studio lot, Spielberg began sneaking onto the backlot after hours to sit aboard the empty vessel. These weren't official visits or publicity opportunities. The director would quietly let himself onto the lot when no one else was around, climb aboard the Orca, and just sit there in the darkness. He later explained that the boat had become a kind of meditation space for him, a place where he could reflect on everything that had happened during the shoot and think about his future projects. The Orca represented both his greatest struggle and his greatest triumph, and being there helped him process the entire experience. But one night, Spielberg arrived for one of his secret visits and found that the Orca was gone. Studio executives, in their infinite wisdom about the value of movie props, had decided the boat was taking up valuable space and ordered it destroyed. Workers had taken chainsaws to the iconic vessel and cut it into pieces, which were presumably hauled off to a dumpster somewhere. Spielberg was reportedly devastated to discover that his private sanctuary had been casually destroyed without anyone thinking to ask if the director who'd made their studio hundreds of millions of dollars might want to keep the boat that had caused him so much pain and brought him so much success. Fact 8. The real boat accidentally sank with actors aboard. While Orca 2 was designed to sink on command, the original Orca was definitely not supposed to go down at all, which made it terrifying when it started rapidly taking on water with cast and crew still on board. The incident happened during a shot that required a speedboat to tow the Orca to create the illusion of movement. The speedboat operator, either through miscommunication or misjudgment, gunned the engine and went far too fast. The sudden violent pull ripped out several planks from the old boat's hull, and water immediately began pouring in through the gaps. The Orca started sinking fast, going down in about 2 minutes from the moment the planks tore free. Cast members who moments earlier had been calmly waiting for their scene to start suddenly found themselves on a rapidly sinking vessel in the middle of the Atlantic. They began yelling for rescue boats to come get them off before the Orca took them down with it. But amid all the chaos and shouting, sound mixer John Carter provided a moment that perfectly captured the dark humor that helped the crew survive the difficult production. While everyone else screamed for help, Carter stood on the tilting deck, holding his expensive sound recording equipment high above his head, and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Fuck the actors! Save the sound department!" His priorities were crystal clear. The actors could swim, but that sound equipment was irreplaceable and represented his livelihood. Fortunately, rescue boats reached everyone in time, and both the actors and Carter's precious equipment made it back safely, though the same couldn't be said for the Orca's dignity. Fact 9. Trophy hunters slowly dismantled Orca 2. Over 30 years. Lynn Murphy thought owning a piece of Hollywood history for $1 would be pretty cool, even if he couldn't use it for the shed he'd planned. He left Orca 2 sitting on his private beach in Menemsha, figuring it would be a neat conversation piece and maybe a tourist attraction. What he didn't anticipate was that obsessed Jaws fans would treat his property like a free souvenir shop that happened to be protected by trespassing laws they chose to completely ignore. It started small, Someone would sneak onto the beach at night and pry off a small piece of trim or a cleat, something they could hide in a jacket. Murphy would notice it was gone, but figured it was a one-time thing. Then bigger pieces started disappearing. One morning he came out to find the entire pulpit, the distinctive forward platform where Quint stood while harpooning the shark, had been removed and hauled away. Then the mast vanished. Then sections of the flybridge. This went on for 30 years, a slow-motion dismantling carried out by people who apparently believed their love of the movie justified theft. Murphy put up no trespassing signs, but the trophy hunters ignored them. He called the police, but what could they do? By the time officers arrived, the thieves were long gone, and good luck tracking down who has a chunk of fiberglass boat hull. The local authorities couldn't exactly stake out Murphy's Beach 24 hours a day to protect a movie prop. So piece by piece, year after year, the Orca 2 was stolen into oblivion by fans who somehow thought taking parts of it was a tribute rather than theft. By the 2000s, so little remained that Murphy faced a difficult decision about what to do with the picked-over skeleton of a boat that was still attracting trespassers to his property. Fact 10. The owners chainsawed it into 1,000 squares. By 2005, Lynn Murphy and his family had spent 3 decades dealing with constant trespassing, theft, and hassle over what remained of Orca 2. They'd tried everything they could think of to protect the boat, but nothing worked. The fans just kept coming, and pieces just kept disappearing. Then Murphy heard that Martha's Vineyard was planning Jaws Fest, a major 30th anniversary celebration of the movie that would bring thousands of Jaws enthusiasts to the island. Murphy immediately realized that Jaws Fest would be a nightmare for him. If hardcore fans had been sneaking onto his property for years when they had to seek it out, what would happen when thousands of them were on the island specifically to celebrate the movie? His beach would be overrun. The Murphys decided they'd had enough. If people wanted pieces of the Orca so badly that they'd commit crimes to get them, fine. The family would cut it up themselves and sell the pieces legitimately. At least that way they'd get something for their 3 decades of trouble, and buyers would get authentic pieces with proper documentation instead of stolen chunks with no provenance. So they got out a chainsaw and went to work on what remained of the fiberglass hull. They cut it into 1,000 squares, each roughly 1 foot on each side. Every square was carefully documented and came with a certificate of authenticity proving it was genuine Orca 2 material. What theft and time had failed to completely destroy, the Murphys finished themselves, transforming the remnants of a movie prop into 1,000 individual collectibles. It was a practical solution to an impossible situation, and it finally put an end to the trespassing problem since there was no longer anything to steal. Fact 11. Pieces now sell for nearly $2,000. Each, when the Murphy family first started selling their 1,000 squares of Orca 2, they priced them at $130 each, mounted in shadow boxes with certificates of authenticity. It seemed like a reasonable price for a piece of movie history, especially considering people had been willing to commit crimes to get chunks of the boat for free. The squares sold steadily to collectors and Jaws fans who were thrilled to finally own a legitimate piece of the famous vessel. But as the years passed and the supply of available squares dwindled, the secondary market for Orca pieces heated up considerably. Collectors who'd missed their chance to buy directly from the Murphys started bidding against each other on auction sites, and prices climbed dramatically. One square eventually sold on eBay for $1,850, more than 14 times what the Murphys had charged. Other pieces have sold for similar amounts as collectors realized that once the 1,000 squares were gone, that would be it. No more Orca 2 would ever become available. The irony of the situation is almost poetic. When the boat was whole, it was worth $1 to Universal Studios. When it was a deteriorating hull on Murphy's Beach, it was worth whatever scrap fiberglass was going for. But cut into 1,000 pieces and scattered among collectors around the world, the destroyed Orca 2 became worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 or $2 million, assuming every piece commanded similar prices. The boat that Universal couldn't give away and that Murphy couldn't protect became far more valuable destroyed than it ever was intact, proving that sometimes the sum of the parts really is greater than the whole, especially when the whole is sitting on a beach, slowly being stolen piece by piece anyway. Fact 12. An archaeologist studied the remains as a fake artifact. Most archaeologists spend their careers studying ancient civilizations, but one anthropology professor became fascinated by something much more recent and decidedly fake. He traveled to Martha's Vineyard specifically to document what remained of Orca II before the Murphys cut it up, treating the deteriorating movie prop as if it were an archaeological site worthy of academic study. His interest wasn't in the boat itself, but in what it had become over the 3 decades it sat on Murphy's Beach. The professor was fascinated by how a deliberately constructed fake object, a fiberglass replica built solely to appear in a movie, had transformed into a genuine cultural artifact that people valued enough to steal. He compared the slow dismantling of Orca II to the way people had looted stone from the Roman Colosseum throughout the Middle Ages. In both cases, a famous structure was gradually taken apart by people who wanted a piece of history for themselves. The professor documented what remained of the hull, photographed it from multiple angles, and conducted interviews with the Murphys about the decades of theft they'd experienced. His goal was to understand how movie props transition from being disposable film equipment to valuable cultural artifacts, and what that transition says about how societies create and assign value to objects. The Orca II represented a perfect case study because its journey from working stunt prop to cultural artifact to pile of cut-up squares happened in living memory and could be documented in detail. For the professor, the boat's status as a fake was precisely what made it interesting. It wasn't history. It was a representation of history that people had decided mattered enough to steal, protect, study, and ultimately destroy to save it from being destroyed by others. Fact 13. There was a support fleet called SS Garage Sale. Filming Jaws on the open ocean required far more than just the Orca and a couple of camera boats. The production actually used 16 different vessels to support the shoot, creating a floating film studio that bobbed in the Atlantic off Martha's Vineyard. Among this small fleet was one ship that became legendary among the crew for being the catch-all vessel where anything and everything ended up. They nicknamed it the SS Garage Sale, and the name was perfect. This support ship was crammed with portable dressing rooms where actors could change and wait between takes, bathrooms so the crew didn't have to motor all the way back to shore. Every time nature called, racks of costumes and backup wardrobe in case someone fell in the water or a scene required a fresh outfit, and piles of equipment that didn't fit on any of the other boats. It was essentially a floating storage unit and comfort station, vital to keeping the production running, but completely unglamorous. When someone needed something and didn't know which boat it was on, the answer was usually, check the garage sale. The ship served the production well through the long, difficult shoot, but like Orca II, it faced an uncertain future once filming wrapped. The SS Garage Sale ended up abandoned on Lynn Murphy's property alongside the remains of the Orca II, another piece of Jaws history that the production no longer needed, and Murphy inherited by default. While the Orca II attracted all the attention from fans and thieves, the garage sale sat nearby, largely forgotten, except by the crew members who remembered spending long hours aboard it, waiting for weather to clear or for the mechanical sharks to start working again. Fact 14. Murphy's boat appears in the climactic scene. If you watch the climactic moment when Chief Brody finally shoots the compressed air tank in the shark's mouth, causing the massive explosion that ends the film, you might notice something odd in the water. There's a wake visible in the frame that doesn't quite match the action on screen. That unintentional detail is actually evidence of Lynn Murphy's towing boat, captured on film as Murphy worked to position the Orca for the perfect shot. Murphy had developed a careful system for rehearsing these complex shots. Instead of using the actual Orca, which could get dinged or damaged during trial runs, he would practice with a buoy that approximated the boat's size and handling characteristics. He'd work out exactly how close he could get the mechanical shark where the boats needed to be positioned, and how all the elements would work together, all without risking damage to the expensive props. Once everything was figured out and Murphy was confident he could nail it, the cameras would roll and he'd execute the real take with the actual orca. But despite all this careful preparation and rehearsal, the wake from his towing boat ended up visible in the final film. It's the kind of minor continuity issue that no one watching in theaters would notice or care about. But for Murphy, it must have been either mortifying or amusing to see evidence of his work accidentally captured in one of cinema's most famous moments. The wake doesn't hurt the scene at all. Most viewers never spot it, and those who do generally don't care because they're too focused on the exploding shark. But it remains a tiny piece of movie magic revealed, a reminder that even the most carefully controlled shots can include unintended elements from the messy reality of filmmaking. Fact 15. The fake orca was more seaworthy than the real one. You'd think a boat specifically engineered to sink on command would be less seaworthy than a genuine working fishing vessel, but according to the boat handlers who worked with both orcas during filming, the opposite was actually true. The fiberglass Orca 2, despite being built as a stunt prop designed to flood and sink, was paradoxically more stable and easier to handle than the converted Warlock that served as the primary filming vessel. The difference came down to design priorities. The Warlock had been modified with all sorts of filming equipment, camera platforms, and special effects gear that were never meant to be on a fishing boat. All that extra weight sitting high on the vessel made it dangerously top-heavy, even after they loaded it with the dentist's lead ballast. It wallowed in rough seas, rolled unpredictably, and generally handled like a boat that was fighting against its own modifications. Meanwhile, Orca 2 had been designed from scratch as a film prop. The builders could place everything, including the pneumatic systems that controlled the sinking, in the optimal locations for balance and stability. They weren't trying to retrofit a working boat into a film prop. They were creating a film prop that happened to float until they wanted it to sink. The result was a vessel that, when it wasn't busy sinking on command, actually handled better in rough Atlantic conditions than the real fishing boat. The boat handlers appreciated the irony. The fake orca was better at being a boat than the real one, while the real orca was better at being destroyed on camera than a working fishing vessel had any right to be. Both boats served their purposes, but nature had been turned on its head. The genuine article had become precarious and difficult, while the obvious fake was steady and reliable, steady and reliable, steady and reliable, steady and reliable.